So yes, I'm an optometrist, not an optimist. My little joke. The conversation about glaucoma is usually health-related. The conversation is about treatments, about what drops you should be taking, about the research, what surgery is available. When you go to your consultation, then it's all about, first of all, they check your vision on a distance chart, nice black letters on a white background, beautifully spaced. And all being well, they'll discuss with you that things haven't changed, so everything's going well there. You might have your visual fields measured, and all being well, the discussion will be about, thank goodness, there's very little change in your visual field. And so everything's hunky-dory, you can go home now, and you're feeling pretty good about this. But then you get home and you sit down to read the newspaper in the dark corner, and you think, you know, things aren't quite right here. So even in the best managed glaucoma, there are often subtle effects on how you function visually. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. The effects can be so subtle that you hardly even notice them, or it can be a whole range through to being quite debilitating. Once again, when you look for information on glaucoma, you check with Dr. Google or whatever, you often come up with a picture like this, which has a tunnel vision with a black outline, you know, where everything is dark and black, and then the center is lovely and clear. But the reality, as we've heard from other speakers, is that the peripheral vision is never quite black like that. It's patchy, it's grey. But more than that, the center of the vision is never quite that sharp and clear. It's often faded and hazy, and it can be a bit patchy also. So the effects that I want to talk to you about today are contrast, dark light adaptation, and glare. So what's contrast? Contrast is how you see things standing out from their background. Contrast is the difference between the intensity of the darkness of the object you're looking at and the intensity of the background. So for example, if you're looking at the big word contrast at the top, I've done it in black so that it stands out from the pale grey or pale bluish background. But below that is the same sized word, contrast, which I've done in grey, in low contrast. And it's much more difficult to differentiate that word from the background. That's what I mean by high and low contrast. So what can be done to improve contrast? The thing is that any condition that affects the eyes, or any neurological condition, which of course, as we've just heard, glaucoma is a condition or a problem of the optic nerve, has the effect of reducing contrast sensitivity. So as we age, all of us lose a little bit of that contrast sensitivity, that ability to pick out things standing out from the background. But when there's any of these conditions of the eye or neurological conditions, what it does is it has the effect of reducing your contrast sensitivity way back beyond just normal aging, so that things don't stand out as crisply as on the distance eye chart, which of course is maximum contrast, black letters on a white background. So what can be done to improve contrast? First of all, good light. And a good light doesn't mean, oh, but I only read by daylight, as so many of my clients say to me. Right at the moment, looking outside, it's fairly brightish, but you think about the last few days, the daylight, dull, grey. And even on a bright sunny day, in 5 minutes' time, it's going to cloud over and it's going to move off to the next window. So when I talk about good light, I mean good controlled light, which is placed close to the point that you're trying to see, and is, ceiling lights, it doesn't matter how strong a bulb you put in the ceiling, because of the distance it is away from you, by the time the light reaches you, it's so spread out and diluted that it's also not giving you that help that you need to bring up the contrast or to see more clearly the things that you want to focus on. We can use contrasting colours and background. Now, for example, the gentleman in the picture, he has very white hair, which is very difficult to see against the white wall behind him. If he was looking in the mirror and he wanted to adjust his hair or see if he needs a haircut, he would be much better off to be having a dark-coloured background wall behind him than a white wall. That's an example of using contrasting backgrounds to highlight things. We can remove confusing patterns. I'm sure you all know of the problem of you put your glasses down on the lovely dining table. It's covered with a beautiful patterned tablecloth, and then you can't find your glasses. Well, they've disappeared into the background, of course. Well, of course, when I say glasses, I do mean your spectacles. If glasses are the things you drink out of, if you can't find those on the background, that's another problem as well. So removing confusing patterns and having plain contrasting background, a light background behind a dark object or vice versa. Sometimes just using a piece of matte black card on a shiny paper can be incredibly helpful. First of all, it dampens down the gloss from the paper, from the background, and it just helps to lift the contrast of the print. And then we have magnifiers now, electronic magnifiers, which not only magnify, but actually convert low contrast and colored print to high contrast black and white, either black letters on a white background, or what's often more comfortable for people with glaucoma is what I've done here, and I've put white letters on a black background, which is also maximum contrast, but it's often more comfortable for people with glaucoma because it's less glary than the white background, which is often needed by people with macular degeneration or other central vision problems. So these magnification is sometimes not the ideal answer for people with glaucoma, particularly if they only have a very restricted central part of their vision that's usable. If we magnify things too much, it just magnifies it into the non-seeing areas. And so as soon as I see that situation, then I know that I'm going to have to use increased contrast to really get some benefits. Which leads me to the second one, which is glare. Many people with glaucoma suffer from glare problems. Glare can cause discomfort. It can be quite disabling. The most difficult type of glare is from reflected light. That's light that's reflected off concrete, of water, of buildings, of paper or workbenches, and most of all, the reflected light of low clouds. Cloudy days can be very dull. The light is very, very dull and difficult to see with, but it can be still incredibly glary because you've got a lot of reflected light of low cloud. So I use a lot of these Fitovers, which a couple of people have referred to already. Most of the sunglasses you buy nowadays are very dark, which means they're not only cutting out the glare, they're actually cutting out the light that you need to help you to see. Many people who wear prescription glasses for distance also have lenses which go dark in the sunlight. But it's only the little lens that goes dark, and you're still getting all the light in all around, which can cause a lot of problems with the glare. The advantage of the Fitovers are sunglasses that can either be worn on their own or they can be worn over on top of a pair of prescription glasses. The advantage is that, first of all, they have a little shelf across the top, which is like a peak cap. Now, a peak cap is a really good way of keeping the light out of your eyes also. They have shields on the side to stop the light getting in from the side. But most of all, they all have polarized lenses. Now, a polarized lens is really good at cutting out glare, even if it's not very dark in color. It's particularly good at reflected glare. Most optometrists have these Fitovers. They usually have them in the two dark colors, the gray and the brown lens. And that's because that's what most people require. But I use a lot of also the yellow or amber lens. The yellow lens is not very dark at all. What it has the effect of, because I see so many people that have lost a lot of contrast, when they have like dull days, they can't wear sunglasses at all because they just can't see with them. The yellow lens has the effect of cutting out haziness, so it tends to put a sharper edge on things and can just make it, for some people, much easier to see. For people with glaucoma, however, the yellow lens is usually still too bright. It doesn't cut out enough light outdoors on a sunny day, and that's where they're better off with the darker colours also. But for many people, the glare can be too much indoors. Even in a setting like this, where you've got lights coming at you from all directions, or the shopping mall, or even the television can be very bright and glary. And that's where the yellow lens can be worn indoors because it doesn't cut out, it's not too dark, it doesn't cut out too much light. So these are all suggestions that are ways to control glare. Sometimes if you've got a bright kitchen bench, you've got a lot of reflected light off a white bench or a shiny stainless steel bench, put a cloth over it. Just a damp tea towel or something like that can just help to make you so much more comfortable. Which brings me to the point of light and dark adaptation. Now, we've talked quite a bit, certainly the driving is a typical situation here, but we've talked also about glaucoma being a problem of the peripheral vision. The peripheral retina is the part of the eye that we turn on and use in the dark. When there's light around, we have to use our macula, which is the center part of the vision. But when it's dark, we have to turn on our peripheral vision, which is not as sensitive, but it's more sensitive to shadows and movements and things. So glaucoma tends to affect the working of the peripheral vision, of the peripheral retina, which means that often if you go, for example, from a well-lit room out into a dark corridor or into a dark, you go out at night and so on, it can take you much longer than the average person to adjust between light and dark. And in fact, the vision can be way worse in the dark than it is in the light. That's really difficult for other people to understand. You know it instinctively because it's happening to you. But, talk to your friends and relatives about it and put some strategies in place to help you with that adaptation. Carrying a torch is ever so helpful to light up the path at night, or even when you put your head into the dark pantry or the wardrobe, having a little torch can be ever so helpful with anything like that. When you walk into a theatre or a picture theatre, it can be very scary because your vision is suddenly way worse than it was just a few steps before. Develop some strategies like, you suddenly remembered that conversation that you meant to have with your companion, and just step to one side and have that conversation, giving you time to adjust to the light. Or cozy up to the companion and take their arm so that they help you down those steps and save you from falling. Strategies like that can be so important, but it's important to understand these changes and help others to understand also. Actually, my grandmother had glaucoma and lost a lot of vision from a very early age. And I always thought that, she wanted me as her little helper because I was the youngest grandchild and I was obviously the favourite. She always asked for my help. It took me a long time to realise that my grandmother was very short, and I was the only grandchild short enough that she could walk with me just half a step ahead of her and put her hand on my shoulder, and that way she always knew when I was about to step down or was walking down a slope, and I was protecting her from things coming at her from the sides that she couldn't see. It took me years to work that out. So there are many, many different aids available to help you as well. Obviously, magnifiers, although magnification sometimes isn't the answer. But when you do need magnification, then it's really important that a good quality magnifier has the light built in, and the light has to be lined up with the magnifier itself so that it's helping you to focus on the spot. Everybody wants a bigger magnifier because they think a bigger magnifier they'll be able to see much more. It must be a better magnifier if it's bigger. Well, size isn't everything, because as magnifiers get stronger, the actual lens in the magnifier gets smaller. So a big magnifier is always a very, very weak magnifier, which is fine if you only need a very weak magnifier. But don't assume that bigger is better. It does get more difficult to use magnifiers as they get smaller. The individual letters you see in the magnifier get bigger, but you see fewer of them, so then you have to be taught how to use it properly. Some magnifiers hold themselves on a stand to keep them in the right position. But most of all, nowadays we have these electronic magnifiers, which not only have a variable magnification, but more importantly, they change low contrast and coloured print to high contrast black and white, or white or yellow on black. And particularly, I find that often with people with glaucoma, that is necessary to get that real burst of assistance. But good lighting, a good lamp may be all that's required. And then there's other fantastic technology when all of these bits and pieces really don't work for you and you're getting fed up with trying to struggle with your reading, or maybe you never learned to read properly in the first place, and lots of people do have reading disabilities. Then we have technology such as Orcam. The gentleman in the picture here actually has very little vision at all, but he's reading the menu from the cafe. Well, he's not actually reading it. It's being read to him by Orcam. This is Orcam, this little thing here. Orcam clips onto the side of a spectacle frame with magnets, and the front, there's a camera. At the back, the sound comes out. In between, there's a fantastic little computer which uses artificial intelligence, and it'll read any text to you, not handwriting, It has to be printed text. It'll read text to you. You can go to the restaurant, go to work, go to your meeting or whatever, and your meeting papers in front of you. It can quietly read them to you. You can teach it to recognize faces. It'll tell you the time, even though you're not wearing a watch. It'll recognize banknotes. So that's a fantastic bit of technology, and this is the way technology will go. A lot of people have found this sort of technology already on their smartphones, for example. Many of your smartphones will read things to you, as well as magnifying as well. So there's plenty of assistance there. That's another picture of the Orcam on the spectacle frame. So in the end, I want you to remember that, first of all, good sight needs good light, and particularly well-controlled light. You need sufficient light, you need it in the right place, and not too glary for you. And the other take-home message is you don't damage your sight by using it. You can damage it by not taking your drops, or not doing your follow-up appointments, or not taking your diabetes medication and things like that, but you never damage your eyes. You never cause deterioration by using your eyes. So I hope that I've been able to give you some strategies and some information to know that there are ways to help you with some of these subtle problems, and enjoy the vision you've got. And now I have all of these things available at the back there. If you want to step by, I can demonstrate them to you individually.